Hello, yoga teachers who both root and rise. Root to Rise is the intersection between self-inquiry, rooting, and teaching extraordinary yoga classes, rising. Welcome. My name is Sherry Fisher. I'm one of the founders of Root to Rise. Many yoga teachers have shared with me that one of the biggest blocks to teaching yoga is a lack of confidence. And a lot of times their confidence levels have nothing to do with how long they've practiced yoga, what yoga teacher training certifications they've completed, what workshops they've attended. Sometimes it doesn't even have to do with how many classes they've actually taught. And if you have an intimidation about your confidence levels, today's guest is going to be for you. She's going to speak to your heart and she's going to speak to your soul. Because what we have found is that confidence is one of the key factors to enjoying teaching yoga and finding growth on your yoga teaching journey. So let me bring in our guest today. Her name is SevanKelee Boult. I met her during my 300-hour yoga teacher training, and she completed her 200-hour in 2018. Her 300-hour during the COVID pandemic, and she has since moved on to her yoga certification, her yoga therapy certification. Sorry about that. And so she is like all in. And I have asked her to come in and share some stories, some experiences, and even some examples of how she has moved from a lack of confidence into being a successful yoga teacher. And I have a feeling that her stories and her presence will both inspire you and encourage you to do the same. So let me bring in SevanKelee. Welcome, SevanKelee. Thanks for joining us today. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So I wanted to start with a barometer of your confidence level. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most confident you can be, when you finished your 200-hour, how confident did you feel?
Not to be funny, but I give myself a 7. I went through Breathe for Change, which is social emotional learning, mindfulness, and 200-hour yoga training for teachers, specifically made for teachers or educators. And so it was intense, and I had 2 really good yoga instructors, Christine Chen and Brima Jha. And they really kind of planted the extra seed of confidence as they taught. They were really good teachers. So about a 7.
So you were a teacher before this, just not a teacher of yoga.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so you'd stood up in front of a class, you'd prepared material, so that part of it was not new to you. You were experienced with that, but what you were learning is how to bring in yoga.
Correct.
So after you finished your 300-hour, let's say now, what's your confidence level now?
I was just giving it a 7.
Okay. I love the honesty.
I do more like since I stopped teaching at school, I probably have like 1 client right now. So so teaching is different because I don't really have I don't know if I would be as confident teaching a group right now, but definitely I know I can do it, but it would be shy. I think I'm a little shy more than I feel lack of confidence. I think I'm a little just kind of like, don't tell nobody I'm a little shy.
I will say too, when I'm teaching regularly, I get into a little groove, and there's a certain comfort level that goes with that. And even when I was getting out of my yoga teacher training, my 200-hour, I challenged myself to teach 10 yoga classes as quickly as possible, just to prompt myself to get into that groove. So I am with you. I think that when we pull ourselves out of teaching, it's more intimidating and our confidence levels can go down a little bit, but it's almost like just getting back on the horse and you just start riding that horse. So tell me about, we sit in office hours together with our 300-hour, and now you've moved on to your yoga therapy. But when you listen to new and newer yoga teachers, what are some of the things that you might share with them, some tips that you might share to help them with their confidence levels?
I think one of the first tips is being thematic and having confidence in the theme that you're building for your sequence. Um, and that we get intimidated by themes, but they're actually really not as hard as you think when you just, if you can make an analogy, if you can just make an analogy of something, that's your thing, what does it mean to sit at a stop sign? What does it really mean to sit at a stop sign? Are you showing patience? Are you being observant of that intersection that you're stopping at? Or are you just looking at the sign and going? And so, like, now I'm going to make a stop sign theme. I'm going to theme it around traffic. And
And
now now I have a whole idea. Everything just popped up all right now. Like, how do I start building the sequence about the metaphors of traffic?
And so a couple of things come to mind for me. One is being mindful and present in your own life. Like you don't have to be super fancy with your themes, but it does give you something to build around. And the second thing that build around, what I envisioned is almost like the framework of a building. Like if you've ever watched a building go up, you see you see the foundation go in, you see the framework go up, but that framework gives you something to build the building around. So that's where all of the interior comes, the structure comes, and that's really how you're treating your theme. Is you're mindful and you just notice what's happening in your own life and you think creatively, like, how can a stop sign be a theme for this yoga class? And then you start to build your sequencing around it, maybe the words that you're going to use, maybe a quote that you're going to bring in. So you find your base and then you build around it. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about theming?
Um, like if you're like you can theme around your peak pose, right? And I always use like I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, so if the bridge pose is my peak pose, then and I'm thinking, I'm gonna theme it around this. How do I get you to this bridge? And what's the route that you're going to take to get to the bridge? And so now I'm sequencing based on, and the thing is the bridge. So now I can, what does it look like to be over the water? Expand your arms. So when you're in warrior, like, so when I'm getting to warrior 2, it's like, oh, expand your arms like the Golden Gate, stretch out, yada, yada, yada. And then it's like, when we finally get to the peak pose of the bridge pose, and it's like, we have drawbridges, we have lift up bridges in the Bay Area. So it's like, so now it's like lift up, like you're at the, Fruitvale Bridge and you're lifting up and you're lifting your heart out. So it's just like, take what you know from your own experience. I feel like when it comes to a pose and how that pose makes you feel as an instructor, and you can, you can theme around it because you're in connection. You're literally in connection with it. Like you can even if you use like reverse, let's say peaceful warrior, reverse warrior, however you want to call that pose, right? Let's just say that's going to be your peak pose, right? And because you're opening up and stretching all this, and you're getting all this open, and you're opening your side, what does that? What does that side opening mean to you? What does that pull mean to you? And how are your feet? How are you using your stance to hold you? And so, like, I feel like when it comes to theming, you can keep it simple. You can take the same sequence and pick a peak pose out of that sequence and now do a whole nother theme just from changing the peak pose in one sequence that you created. So you don't have to always, you can keep the same sequence and change the theme. And then that way you're like, you changed everything just, and if you're doing a heart opener, you can change the theme even if you're using some of the same poses. Know which poses are the heart opener poses and focus more on those. Thank you. Focus on the other poses, I guess. Is
So it sounds like we might be jumping into a second tip, but before we do, let me come back and talk to our viewers. So SevanKelee has just shared with you like a really simple thing. Be mindful of your life, what's going on in your life. And even her examples of the stop sign and the bridge, those are common things in the area where she teaches. And so building themes around that will make sense to you. It'll also make sense to your students. And it doesn't have to be hard. Think creatively, be super simple about it. So maybe right now you stop and look around and see whatever there is to see, notice what you're feeling, and think about maybe one or two things that maybe you could create a theme around, because it's that simple. And building confidence does not need to be hard. SevanKelee, let's talk about you started to talk about it, and I think this might actually be its own tip, which is the simplicity of it all. That it may be from a practitioner standpoint, an excellent yoga teacher teaches some sort of this beautiful, intricate class, when really it's probably a very simple class done well. So talk to me about maybe a tip around keeping it simple.
that's my kiss. Keep it simple, sweetie. Just keep it simple. You're gonna go to somebody else's class. Um, some teacher gives you 30 poses, 30 asana, and it's a great flow, and it's oh my god, I want to do that class. I want to teach that, and it's like simmer down now, simmer down now, simmer down now. Again, like what I was saying about you can take the same sequence and move the pink pose, take the pink pose, and readjust until you feel more confident. Don't overdo it. Don't overdo your own self. You won't realize how fast doing the left and right side of just the sun salutation and warrior and a warrior two sequence, some type of warrior sequence, will be 45 minutes if you do it right. So, and that isn't even getting down to like shavasana yet, right? Next thing you know, you're looking up, you're like, oh my god, that was only 10. Oh my goodness. So the simple is to know what your blocks are, those blocks that you're making, those blocks that you're creating to go with your peak pose. And it's like, okay, I'm going to do this many reps of this many reps of that, this many reps of this. And your reps are your breath. And just don't forget to breathe. Like, how many breaths are you taking? And give your students the time. That's what keeping it simple is breathing through each one. So if you're giving yourself the time to breathe, that's how simple it can be to get through 15 asana, and all of a sudden you're in shavasana. Y'all down on this, y'all laying down for the next 10 minutes.
And I think it's important. I mean, it just a complicated class does not mean a good class. And a complicated class from a teacher's perspective can really choke you up. It's when those thoughts can get into your head and you're like, I don't remember what pose comes next because it's so complicated, you can't even follow it. And we as yoga teachers can make a very simple sequence very meaningful and turn it into a great class. So I think if there's anything that our viewers take away from this tip alone, keep it simple, sweetie, is keep it simple, because you don't want to complicate it so much that you choke yourself up, that you confuse your students. It doesn't need to be complicated to be good. Yeah. And then SevanKelee, talk to me about, especially when I was new at teaching, I had a huge fear that I'd make a mistake and it would be unrecoverable. And I still make mistakes. I forget a pose here or there, or I do something different on one side than the other. So talk to me about making mistakes and how that feeds into your confidence.
I made a mistake. Yay, I made a mistake. Celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. All mistakes, celebrate them. They are lessons. They are the things that teach you what it is that you're missing on something. It's not a bad thing. it's a great thing. Like, it's just the most excellent thing to make a mistake, because now it means that you're physically processing, you're mentally processing, you're spiritually processing, and now you're like actually able to do something. And it's like, oh, you didn't do it correctly. And I'm putting that in quotes. You didn't do it correctly. However, it's like, oh, I did it. Awesome. How do I need to change it? Not, oh, that's horrible. No, it's great that you made a mistake. It's awesome that you made a mistake. It is a learning, it's a place to learn for you. It's a place to learn. It's a place to, what do they call it? Teachable moments. It's teachable moments for you and your students. As a school instructor teaching the kids, I used to love messing up in math, because they'd be like, Miss Paul, that's not the answer. I'm like, what is the answer? You made a mistake. Oh, I did. I made a mistake. Show me where I made a mistake so we can all learn together. Because someone else, one of those students made the same mistake I did. So now we're teaching them, hey, this is the process of fixing it, right? So it's like, fixing it isn't fixing it more than it is understanding where you need to adjust. It's like,
The
lenses. You're
binoculars.
just adjusting. You're just adjusting a little bit here and there. But there's no mistake in looking through the binoculars, right? You can't make a mistake looking through them. You just have to focus and adjust, right? So I think it's the same thing with that. Just, it's okay to make mistakes. I think they're awesome.
And I think you are also teaching your students, and in this case, it sounded like they were maybe younger students, but you're teaching them how to handle mistakes. It's not the end of the world. You're not a terrible person if you make a mistake. You were demonstrating to them how to handle and befriend mistakes and celebrate it when it happens, and seeing it as a learning opportunity rather than as a failure. And I think that's brilliant. And my guess is that when Miss Bolt made a mistake and the teacher and the students got to help Miss Bolt correct that, they probably did not ever forget that step in their equation ever again. So I think this may be hard for yoga teachers, because I think we can get stuck on perfection and wanting it to be just like the yoga teacher who's been teaching for 20 years, and we want to deliver a class just like that. And if we don't, then we're this failure. But the mistakes are there for learning and to celebrate and to be a role model and to embrace and not to beat ourselves up about. So SevanKelee,
Oh, did I do the left side? No, I didn't do the left side. Let's do the left side. Did I do the right side? Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Let me backtrack. I apologize. Let's do the back track. I'm supposed to do this instead of that. I'm a performing artist. You don't have to, if you make a mistake, it's improv. You go and not fake it till you make it. You just go where you left off, or find where it is you're supposed to be. Oh, I was supposed to do bridge pose after staff pose, but I went ahead and did twisted, supine or something. Oh well,
Well, and
you do bridge pose.
I think you bring up two really good points, which are improvisation. It's not a yoga class is not necessarily a linear line. And second, have
Mm-hmm.
fun. Stuff happens in yoga, and you just work with it. So, SevanKelee, I asked you if you could come up with some sort of a challenge for our viewers so that they could play with some of these confidence building tips that you had. So, what do you have for us?
So this is the challenge. Okay. Um, make a sequence, record that sequence. Do not watch that sequence or listen to that sequence for 24 hours. And the next day, you do the sequence. Do that a couple of times during the week to see the progress of, like, take the same sequence and you record it several times. And each time after you've watched it and recorded, you can take notes on things that you saw for yourself that you may want to improve upon for yourself as an instructor, right? It's not a criticism, oh, I could have done this better. It's more of a, oh, I see where I could say more here. I see where I can add some breath here or some more cues for breathing. And you can notice that my first video, I didn't say any breathing cues, not one. Is that okay? Yeah, sure. That's fine. Everybody's going to breathe at their own. But if you're going to do that, then announce that. So if you notice something like that, like, so as you're going through your videos, don't watch them the same day you record them. Take a day off from your own recording and then listen to it again and then re-record that sequence and see the progress after a week or 2 weeks of watching yourself do the same sequence until you you'll see the confidence that you actually built up just by doing your own work.
How informational for ourselves. So what I'm hearing you say is record yourself teaching a sequence. Let's say it's a 30-minute sequence. Don't listen to it. Tomorrow, maybe I practice to it, because one of the best things I have found is practicing to my own teaching. So I understand my pacing, my timing, how I'm describing something. I'm experiencing it from my practitioner's standpoint. And then you're saying re-record it a couple of days later and re-practice it the next day, and maybe do that over time so that you can, it's almost like you're seeing the progression from day 1 to day 10 and just noticing, because something you did on day 1 might be exactly the way you love to hear it. And then, but you're weaving together like the best things that you've done through teaching the same sequence over and over again. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about building confidence?
I got this book during my 200 hours. It was a required reading for my 200 hours, and it fundamentally changed my world as an educator, period. And The Courage to Teach is a really, really, really good book, because it talks to the teacher in you, and it lets you know how it makes you understand what type of teacher you are, what type of teacher you want to be and aspire to be, and how to get there. Because, some of us are, again, perfectionists. We're trying to be perfect in what we do, so the delivery of it may come off different for each student, right? And so The Courage to Teach shows you the aspect. I felt like it read the aspects of different ways that students can understand and misunderstand us as instructors. So it's a great read. It's not too hard, but that's like one of my best educational books that I felt like as a teacher. That has nothing to do with yoga. It just has to do with being a teacher, period. And I think that that's the thing, is it's like, as new yogis, this would be a good book, so that it helps. This is another way to help build a little bit more confidence in your own self, and feel proud of who you are as the new instructor that you are. Right.
And that reminds me too, I haven't mentioned it yet, but SevanKelee has put together a handout that is available, and we have that link in our show notes. And it's her 3 tips that she put together, and she put this book, this resource on there as well, The Courage to Teach. So I hope that you will check it out. SevanKelee, thank you so much for all of your stories and sharing of your experiences and giving us some examples and your wonderful tips today. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, back to me. So here we are, and you've got your coaching challenge, which is to record yourself doing a sequence and then wait 24 hours at least until you practice it, and do that over time, almost like a time-lapse photography, and just see what changes. What do you like? What can stay? What can go? Maybe what do you want to change? SevanKelee, I think that was just absolutely brilliant. So we bring you these segments each month to help build your knowledge base, which in turn builds your confidence, because we want you to be relaxed, be comfortable, and really enjoy your yoga teaching experience and have more confidence in doing so. And I think SevanKelee today shared some really good tips for you. So I hope you will download that handout. If you'd like to get your hands on our book, Standing Room Only, How to Be That Yoga Teacher, we also have that link available. And in that book, we lay out the 5 pillars of powerful teaching, which are communication, character, connection, commitment, and consideration. So I hope you'll check that out. SevanKelee is also one of the members in our Facebook group, which is the Yoga Teacher Gathering Space. So please feel free to jump in there, share your experiences as a yoga teacher and maybe how you work to build your confidence, because I think all of us are experts and we all have something to share. So hopefully we will see you in the Yoga Teacher Gathering Space. And this is where we talk about all things yoga and teaching yoga, and we root and rise together in our quest to become better, more confident yoga teachers. We'll see you soon.